Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. You're here at one of our Yale Alumni Nonprofit Alliance programs on pursuing your mission. Today's focus is on really the basics of budgeting. We have some terrific speakers, well known to YANA, very involved, very experienced. Merle Duskin Kailas is one of our YANA board members. We have Caterina Passoni, who has been kind of involved parallel with YANA since the very beginning, and Samra Ali, who is their board chair now. And Samra joined their board through a YANA connection. So it's all kind of coming full circle, which is beautiful. So don't forget that if you ever need anything, YANA sits at the hub of, almost over 8,000 people, and probably somebody in our network knows something that could help answer your questions. And that's why we have these three people here. Okay, so let's a couple logistics. We did get your questions for those of you who wrote them in your registration form. I passed them along to the speakers. We'll do our best to answer and cover those. If we don't get everything, you can always send us an email later. But we just want to let you know we had those. And we have a quick audience survey so we can get a sense of how large the organizations are that you represent, what you're kind of looking to get out of this, and how experienced you are. So hopefully you have did that pop up for everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Give it a sec. Okay, there are 40 people on the call. It's coming in. I know it might take a second to type in what you're looking for.
Recording in progress.
More. We're almost up to 20. Come on, we have 40 people on the call. I'd love to get more responses. Looks like majority, a couple were sort of split, bimodal, below 200 and above 1 million. That's actually not surprising. We seem to see that for some reason. All right. Anybody else? It's slowed down. Anything else? 24. I'll give anybody else who's still typing another second. We have a large range of age. We saw the registrations, and we have a good representation from Yale College, from the Divinity School of Forestry, SOM.
Somebody call me?
Whoever that is.
Just sit out in the hall on the phone.
Could you please put yourself on mute, whoever that was?
Look.
Okay. We're going to end the poll. Let's get a sense of where people are. And I think I can share the results.
Oh.
Do you guys see this? I don't know what it looks like on your end, but. So about, majority are very small, and a couple of outliers above 1 million or above 500. And looks like majority of you, this is not your first rodeo managing a budget. A couple of you are. Some things people want to learn. Can you guys see that? I have no idea what that looks like.
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay,
You have to scroll down to see all the.
Oh, okay, beautiful. Perfect. All right, if I stop sharing, is that okay for my moderated speakers? Do you guys got some information? Good. Okay, well, thank you for giving us that basic information. That's very helpful. I think what we'd like to do is we're going to jump right in and start with kind of an overview. What is a budget? And what's its purpose? And with that, I'm going to start with Merle, and I will pin you, and I'll switch to a different view so everybody can see where you are.
Okay, I'm here, and I'm very happy to be speaking to all of you tonight. I'm a huge budget nerd, and mainly because A budget is nothing but a story, but instead, if I was an English major and I was used to telling stories, but a budget is just a story, but instead of being in a written language like English or another language, it's in numbers. And all a budget does is represent what you want to accomplish for the year. So I always, say that if you have a strategic plan, most people aren't having long-term strategic plans, but they have 1 to 3 years. Then this year, what do you want to accomplish on that strategic plan? What are your goals? What are your hope to do? At the end of the year, what do you want to say that you've accomplished? And then once that is in place, then the numbers fall from that. And there's several advantages about approaching a budget like that as a story. There are a lot of non-financial people, I'm sure all of you deal with on your boards, who see a spreadsheet and then they immediately go stone cold. Well, this is a way they can say, oh, I see that idea. Oh, and I see in order to accomplish that, I need to hire another staff person, or I need to buy more books, or I need to get backup, or whatever you need will be expressed in the story first and then shown in the numbers. And as we all know, buy-in is extremely important when you're dealing with a nonprofit organization and a budget, because when a board, and I always say this to the boards that I sit on treasurer or that I lead, when you sign up for your budget, that's your commitment to help that organization raise that money and accomplish their mission. So these things have to be taken very seriously. And also, I'm going to show you a template that I find very useful for a brief second, but I don't want to dwell on it. Always remember that your budget as a manager or as a board member is for your managerial information. The minute somebody comes to you and starts setting up your accounts so it makes their life easier to file your 990, which is the tax return for nonprofits, you will be in trouble, because you need to know what's going on in a way that you can understand it and a way that you can compare it. So it really begins with what I told you I was a nerd, what we, call the chart of accounts. And the chart of accounts must be set up so that you get the managerial information you need. And right now, the way that most, like QuickBooks and other programs, are set up so that you can have your managerial information, but you can also set up projects. So if you get a lot of organizations and nonprofits go crazy because they have this grant or that grant, and they try to set up accounts so that they can report on those grants at the end of the year. And then you just have this big mishmash because one organization wants their reports one way and another calls it another thing. So, you have your project manuals that you can set up, and then right away, how an individual project is doing. So I'm just going to share this 3 seconds. I don't really want to dwell on it, but can everybody see that? Is it big enough?
There you go.
Maybe I have to make it a
Nope, there it
little.
is. There it is. Looks
Yeah.
great.
Okay. So when you're going over your budget with your board or your finance committee or anything, it's very helpful to see all the actual data for a few years back, and then the last year's budget, so they can compare what that last year's budget is, with the actual, so they could see how spot on you were. And then it's always good to have at least 2 or 3 scenarios. One is just stay the same and do nothing. 2 is kind of where everybody usually winds up, in the middle of the road. And 3 is, budget scenario C, which I've called here, is, if we got a lot of money, what we would do. And so this shows the organization and the board. It gives the board some perspective. Okay, you want to achieve these goals, this is what's going to cost you. If you want to achieve those goals, this is what it's going to cost you. So Rachel will list this template. I tried to make it as generic as possible, but Rachel will list this template so that you can have access to it. I just wanted to scroll down.
We have a
and-
resources document with links to these things that we'll share with you
Uh-huh.
towards the end.
So just to touch on the budget process, you know, it's really a cooperative effort. The executive director can start it off, the finance committee started off, but the most important thing is, as usual at a nonprofit, involve as many people as you can, get input from as many people as you can, because it really is the operating, it's what you need as an executive director to make your organization function throughout the year. So
Oh,
that's
that's a beautiful introduction. Thank you. Caterina and Samra, kind of let's start with you since you started from zero, right? From a very beginner organization up until now, and now you've got a board chair. So let's talk a little bit about like what was the budget? How do you basically set it up, and how has that changed over time? And then we can get into what is the process like now and how you work with your board. And we'd love to hear from Samra from that side as well.
Yes, thank you so much for taking the time tonight, everyone. It's always an honor to speak about these things with Yana. So just a little bit about Havenly. We are a nonprofit social enterprise that our primary goal is to provide job training and community empowerment to refugee women. So we started in 2019 as a student-run project at Yale. And our first budget was $15,000. I was looking at it as we were starting, as I was preparing for this. And our current budget is $1.6 million. So we've definitely spanned a range of different budgets. And so hopefully I can give you a bit of information about what that looks like at different levels of kind of organization's growth. And the other thing I do want to mention is that we are also a social enterprise, so we do have a source of earned revenue. And if anyone wants to talk more about that and kind of managing a budget, please do feel free to ask for my email. I'm always happy to kind of talk more about that. So the first kind of thing I want to echo what was said, that a budget, you really don't want to start with the budget and the numbers to determine your goals. You want to first start with your goals and then go with the budget. So what was just said is really important. Before you even touch on the budget, create a strategic plan with clear goals, especially if you're a startup, but that's relevant always. You don't want your goals to be determined by the numbers. You want the numbers to be determined by your goals. And so start with the strategic plan. Once you have those goals, you can start thinking, okay, how do I actually achieve those goals? At a startup phase, I would suggest keeping your budget as simple as possible. A lot of the budget templates you're going to see are for more advanced organizations that have a lot of different grants that are allocated to that are complicated to deal with in accounting. If you're a small organization under $50,000 a year, you probably do not need a very complicated budget. You probably need income. So you want to, I do usually, want to understand what is my income? What are we going to make this year? That's where you're going to have to project, especially if you're a startup. That's a really, really hard thing to do. My approach to projections is always driven by creating scenarios like was presented. So you want to first start with what am I sure that we can achieve, we can get this year? So maybe someone has already given you a grant, so you already know you have that grant. You put it up there. Maybe you 90% sure that donor that you've been talking about with the project with is going to give you a grant. You can put it up there. But if you're kind of imagining your vision that Melinda Gates is going to give you $1 million this year, you probably want to put that in the scenario B, where you're like, this is the amazing plan where everything comes true. So definitely start with the income, start with what is money we already have, what is money that I actually realistically think we can get. You want to think about grants, and you also want to think about individual giving, and you want to divide those. So don't put them all in the same line. Individual giving is when someone, when maybe you do a campaign and everyone gives you just an individual gift. A grant is from a foundation. I imagine a lot of us know, but just in case. And so you want to make a line for grants, a grant, and a line for individual giving, and then just try to imagine what could happen this year. It's also really helpful to do it month by month, right? Because you want to make sure that a lot of gifts come around Thanksgiving and Christmas. So I need to know that my money is going to be available at the end of the year, not in June or something like that. And so once you have that, then, or you can also start with expenses, but you want to go to expenses. There you want to think about what is your program going to look like? Some things are probably going to be very obvious to you. For example, we have a kitchen, so kitchen expenses are gonna be rent, ingredients, things like that are gonna be obvious. Other things are gonna be less obvious. I highly, highly suggest as a startup person that you put some kind of money to pay yourself, even if you're not planning on it, even if you're planning on volunteer the entire year. At least put in the budget what a staff member would look like if they were paid. Why? Because that's actually going to give you a sense of what your organization needs to move forward. The only caveat I'll put on that is if you're creating a volunteer-led organization, obviously that's very different. But if you're planning on developing a nonprofit or anything that's going to actually require program staff, start doing it. I didn't do that. I didn't pay myself for a couple of years. It was not fun. And then when I left for my personal kind, and Samra was here when I left for a sabbatical, I was shocked by what other people would want to be paid to do the job I was doing. Why? Because I was underestimating how much I was actually doing for the organization. So again, even if it's volunteer, the other thing is that you can also then report in-kind donations. If everyone in your organization is volunteer, then you could say, these are all the amazing people that are doing all this incredible volunteer work, and they would amount to X amount of hours. So definitely think about program staff. Think about accounting. In the startup moment, you do not need QuickBooks or an advanced accounting system. In my opinion, this really, if you're starting up with $1 million, it's different, but I'm talking like we're starting up with $15,000 to $50,000. There's a lot of other accounting softwares. One is called Aplos that are pretty simple and kind of just integrate with your bank account, but cost a lot less. But do find an accounting software that can integrate with your bank account, so you're starting to see what your expenses are. And yeah, so make it integrate accounting expenses, integrate what is your website, what is your, just try and think through everything that we're going to need to operate this year. And so that's kind of hopefully a bit helpful. And again, you want to make scenarios. So you want to make one budget that what is in my head, I call my baseline budget. If the world collapses this year, what can we keep doing? And then my second budget, if things go well and we grow, I usually call that the growth budget. How can we grow? At a startup level, you might even want to have more than that. You might want to have like scenario budgets that are like, we started without a physical location. So I had a budget for when we actually got a physical location. How does our organization change? So you might want to, if you have in your strategic plans any major maybe you want to start a food pantry. Okay, we actually get a food pantry, then things are going to look different than how it looks right now. And then I guess I'll talk a little bit more, a little bit now about like what happens once you start growing. Once you start growing, you want to start thinking about your different programs and what each of your different programs actually need. Like Merle said very well, you don't want to do it by grants. You don't want to say, okay, so I'll just give a practical example. In year 3, we got a $2 million grant from the government, and that changed our organization forever, right? But what we did, because our accountant told us to do that, is we created an entire budget that was completely determined by what do we do with that money, and then everything else is in a different bucket. That's not going to work very well because your organization might use one grant for multiple programs. It's not that a grant is always a program. As you develop, you might use different grants for one grant for multiple programs. So you actually want to start it with, what are my programs? What are the different activities we're doing? And also going back to staff, how much staff time is being spent on the different programs? Obviously, if a staff member is only on one program, that's pretty straightforward. But if you're still smaller and you're still growing, you might have a staff member that dedicates 50% of their time to one program, 50% of their time to another program. Even if that's paid by the same grant, you want to know how their time is allocated. So that you can do through a staff allocation spreadsheet where you say, okay, I can also send a template if anyone is interested, but I'm sure it's probably on a lot of the ones we've sent. My staff member, I pay them $50,000 a year, and 50% of their time is spent on program number 1, 50% of their time is spent on program number 2. And then on the program spreadsheet, I have staff, and it only pulls 50% of the salary, not the whole 100%. That also, as a manager, will give you a real sense of what your program is costing. I think a lot of you had questions about how do I manage a budget now that we're having a lot of fears of this grant might get cut, the other grant might get cut. That can help you understand, okay, if this grant gets cut, 50% of my staff on this program can no longer work on it. It affects this other program this other way. It'll help you understand the impact more practically. You also still want to think of the baseline budget, the different scenario budgets when you propose it to the board, so that there can be multiple different scenarios. And then you're probably going to want to start getting more granular in terms of the different expenses as you're growing. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else. The last thing I'll say is, once you have that budget, you probably also want to have a cash flow spreadsheet. You need to have a cash flow spreadsheet that gives you a sense of what your cash flow, how much money do we have? I can't remember the exact accounting word. It's like the run. Anyways,
The burn rate.
Thank you. So if we didn't get any more grants and all our grants get suspended, how long do we have as an organization? So you want to know that 3 months, 6 months, and you might want to also model that depending on the grants, right? So we have some major grants that are federal, others that are state. So this year, what I've done is, given that certain grants might be cut, what happens if that grant gets cut? How long do we have for that program? So you want to model that out in more of a cash flow analysis. And again, I'm happy to kind of answer more detailed questions, but hopefully that gives you a sense. And the last thing I want to say is, and this is, Samra can come in and give you more of a sense of, what the board view looks like, but you're never going to be able to know exactly what the expenses are for a year. especially in a year like this one. Things are going to change fast. We don't know what the revenue is going to look like, but that's okay. That's when it comes in. Okay, I'm going to tell my board at some point during the year that the budget has to change. What you want to do is basically give them your best estimate of what you think will happen this year. And that's especially important at the startup phase as well.
Beautiful. Samra, I'd love to have you come in because all nonprofits have boards, and you're always doing a budget no matter how small you are. And so, what is it like from your perspective?
Thank you, thank you. I'm just so happy to be here, and just all I will say is that you pray that your nonprofit has someone like Caterina working for you, because she is going to make sure every single time the budget comes through, we start the year thinking this year is going to be so awesome. We got everything sorted. In the middle of the year, we're panicking. By the end of the year, we're like, no way. And then we finish it by some grace of God, where we're like, okay, we're alive. We can look forward to the next year. So, but you honestly, your ED, your finance person is going to be the person who's going to make sure the boat is going where you want it to go. The board's position, which Katrina and I have had so many conversations on, is as we've grown through the years. It's been 4 years now that I've been, and I came on as treasurer and now went on to board chair, is how does the board promise to stay out of the weeds and let the operational staff, the ED, the people in the team, trust them to do the job that they're doing instead of asking them questions about the weeds. And every time Katrina would call me with something, I'd be like, this is, you're taking me in the weeds, bring me into the bigger picture. You need to keep me in the bigger picture, because then I will just stay here with you and nobody will be able to see where the ship is going. So if you can imagine a ship, the board is on the person on the top mast, just seeing that we're avoiding all the icebergs and we're going where we need to go. We're never down in the boiler room. So you have to separate yourself from what the day-to-day tasks are happening, but obviously have an amazing captain who knows where it's going. And that is my number one advice to anyone who's promising to be on a board, is promise to stay out of the weeds. But at the same time, you're looking at what is happening and see how you are supporting them to grow. You're building a Lego block house when it's a startup. It's just, you're finding blocks everywhere. You're saying, we can make a door out of this. We can make a window out of this. But as it's growing, you're like, guys, we need the foundation to be stronger. We need this to happen. Because if you're standing on the outside, you can see if cracks are beginning to emerge, or if you're putting too much pressure on one thing. That is what the board can recognize, appreciate, and support in. So things that I have learned, that I have worked with Katrina on over the board as we plan the next year's budget, is, where is pay equity going? Are we raising the pay for everybody? Are we looking at clear roles distribution within the staff? Are we looking at in-kind hours? Is everyone logging them, including the board? Because when she is putting them into grants, she's able to say, my board gave over $100,000 of billable hours in finance support, in legal support, in accounting support, in social services support. So you're able to monetize the value that the board brought in for you. Is there insurance? Do we have a 403B? If you're a nonprofit, this is what you as board will be looking for. These are all budget line items that come in over the years, but it's the board's fiduciary responsibility to be there to make sure that the organization is growing. Because in the beginning, everybody is happy and they're putting in their blood, sweat, and tears. But over the years, like Katrina said, she went out not for selfish, she went out to study and to come back to give to Heavenly. But it's our job as board to make sure that we're there to support her, to make sure that it's running behind her and it's ready for her when she comes back with an improved role for her. Because if she's coming back in the weeds, back on everyday operations, then it's not doing any justice to the person who's given so much to the organization. So that is what I would say that the board must keep an eye on. If you need, if you have questions, set out time, set mandatory at the minimum quarterly board budget review meetings with the ED to see where the budget is going, because you'll be able to see that, okay, end of the year is coming. What is it? Giving Tuesday is coming. The Great Give is coming. How can we help? How can the board step in? Like Merle said in the beginning, it's a contract that we're agreeing to make sure that this money comes in. So now you are coming in with options, with ideas. But when you give an idea, be prepared to put the work in that is needed to support that idea. As in, let's go do a crowdfunding. What can I do? Do I know someone in crowdfunding? Can I help you start the campaign? Can I help you market the campaign? Can I help you bring in some money in? Can I help connect you with some donors? Even if it is a LinkedIn connection, but be there to support so that the budget, that storybook that you designed in the beginning of the year, does come through and does come to its happy ending. I personally am currently a seminary student. So for me, a lot of things start with a spiritual entrepreneurship mindset. That is where I met Rachel with, and my connection to YANA is because Rachel was my mentor on my spiritual entrepreneurship master's program through Columbia. And this is why I feel that we have to constantly know what our intention is. What did we set our intention in the beginning? Who did we set out to serve? How did we set out to serve them? What was the mission model that we were looking for? So just what Merle and Kathy have already said, remember your strategic goals, make sure your budget aligns with them, and then remind yourself of them continuously. Because if you keep on doing that, you will always be tethered to what you were working towards, and you'll be able to work towards it. The other thing that we thought of, yes, and be there to ask the tough questions. Okay, Katrina, I see this dream. Do we have money to do it? How are we going to get the money to do it? What is the plan? What if this doesn't come through? And then the toughest question I've had to ask Kate is, are you going to give me another strategic plan? And she would say, yes, it's strategic plan number 47 of the year, but I am going to give it to you. So those are the conversations that you will have. But at the same time, as the board, know your responsibility, know what you're looking out for, and go get training. I've done enough nonprofit ready.org trainings for certifications to keep on saying, what is the board budget? Because when the word grants come in and I have no idea what it means, I go in and I take a grant training at Nonprofit Ready, because there are terms that she will use, like these are restricted funds, these are non-restricted funding, this is operational funding, and you will require to be able to serve beyond that initial passion that you signed up for and actually be able to stand there with her and serve it. I think that's all I have to say is just know what you came in for, be ready to sign up for it. It's a beautiful storybook that you design at the beginning of the year, but then you have to walk the walk with them and just do regular check-ins. Be prepared for the meetings, come in. We have a good best practice at Havenly that Katrina always sends us reading materials with the board agenda before coming in, and we always have the strategic plan with it. We have the org chart with it. So if things have shifted from the previous meeting to the new meeting, the board doesn't come in fully blind. We already know the questions to ask, and then we can start the meeting from there. Let me know if you have any questions, and if you want to help design the mission model or build a nonprofit from scratch, or help where the board should be. Rachel has me forever. She has my email.
Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you so much, Samra and Caterina. Maybe Merle, we'll go back to you. I think are there any remaining questions from the audience that was submitted ahead of time that we didn't get to yet?
Let's see. Somebody asked if QuickBooks was a good to use to form a budget. And QuickBooks always runs a budget to actual, and then you could run it over multiple years. So again, I refer back to the model I put up. It's always good to see your past budgets when you're thinking about your future budgets and how you did against them. That's always a good management tool. Another thing that I wanted to come back to is a budget, as Caterina said, and as Samra said, it's only your best guess given a certain time of what it's going to be. It's not the law. You have to look at it more as buckets. So let's say your total revenue expect is $500,000. The appeal is going to be 100,000. The gala is going to be whatever, whatever, whatever. And it turns out that the appeal only gets, 90,000, but then you can make it up. It's just the big number that counts. So you want to meet your goal when you set up your budget in the beginning of the year. It's just buckets that are completely fungible. The big number is what you want to meet always. Somebody asked that is there more than one way to incorporate a nonprofit? And the answer to that is no. You write your articles of organization. They come before the state. They're approved by the state. And once you have that, you can apply for an employee identification number and also your 501c3 status from the IRS.
Rachel, if I can just
Yeah,
add
go
one
ahead, go
thing that
ahead.
was coming to mind as Samra was speaking. As your organization gets larger, you're also going to start noticing that you're not the best person at knowing all the budgetary questions of different departments. Samra helped me understand this a lot as we were growing. So you actually might want to ask different staff members to create their own budgets instead of creating it for them. This does require some training because not everyone is familiar with creating a budget. But if you have a program director, I highly, highly recommend asking that program director, what is your budget for the year? First of all, it will actually help them understand what their budget will be so that they're not coming to you all year asking what their budget is. And secondly, it's going to help you understand from their viewpoint, what do they need financially. They're the experts of their own
Domain, yeah.
Of their own domain. So it is definitely, Nida is my co-executive director. She runs the business side and the kitchen and the sales. I don't know when we need new equipment in the kitchen. So if I was making the budget for the year, I might miss something really significant. So as your organization grows from an organization where you're the main staff member to a larger organization, you really want to make sure that you are giving the other departments, they're creating their own budgets, and then you can review them and tell them this is doable, this is not doable.
Excellent. Merle, did you have something else you want to jump in? Otherwise, I have a couple other
Say
questions.
something. As an
Yeah, go ahead.
executive director, the budget is your best friend, and I will tell you why. Board members seem to have oftentimes very creative ideas about what the organization should be doing. And, there's such a danger of mission creep. So if the director has a budget that everybody agreed to, it's always the executive director or the board chair can always say, wow, such a great idea. Next time when we put the budget together, why don't we think about, or, is that on mission? Oh, well, do we have to look at our mission again? But it's your best defense if you're running this organization against mission creep, because there's a lot of ideas that filter all over the place. And, some of them are really great. But it gives you the opportunity to say, well, when we're putting together the budget next year, let's give consideration to that.
Beautiful.
And
Point.
mission creep is so true, and I am guilty of it myself as much as any other board member. But I do want to also say that even as board members or as EDs or as team leads, you will hear buzzwords within your industry. Everybody will be using the word Salesforce. They'll be using this program, that program. So before you fall into any one of those, I would ask you to work, really urge nonprofits, especially small nonprofits and larger ones, before you commit a lot of funding to one software that then may lock you, because those are just the limitations of it. Ask the team requesting that software to give you the ask of what they need. So you go in with what you're buying for, because sometimes you will come home with just a warehouse, as in with Salesforce. But then you have to design the entire warehouse yourself, and designing requires its own budget line item. So be mindful before you go, even with QuickBooks, or you have staff, timekeeping software or anything. If you're a small nonprofit, an Excel worksheet will keep your time as much as you need to. But then if you're more than 20 people and you have 12 different grants, you're going to need something to keep track of that. So that is what I mean, is your budget may need sidestepping, the buckets will need to shift, and you have ownership to change it. Like Merle said, it's not the law. You'll be able to move it, but just be mindful of where you're moving the items from one bucket to the other. And did you need to do that? And if you need to do that, just do so. But just go in knowing what you're shopping for before you buy something. That I will definitely, because there's a lot of shopper's remorse when we buy these huge softwares.
Good point. Two questions for you guys before we open up to the audience. Managing things like special events or galas, other kinds of special programs, one off, not part of your actual programming. Anything particular to keep track of or to know? Merle, you're a whiz with running our gala and conference budget.
And just that one year leads to the other year. And the first year is really the hardest, because you kind of you're fumbling around. What are people willing to pay for this gala? What should my ticket price be? And so it's always good to talk to an event planner who knows your market. But once you have some history, then it's just a question of, deciding ticket price. Do you want to make a lower ticket price and get more people? You want to make a higher ticket price and, then you get less people. So there's a lot of decisions that have to be made, but it's just kind of experience will always lead you through what you can expect.
Caterina, did you have anything else to add? Have you guys held major fundraising campaigns or galas?
We have not really done big events, but we have done a lot of crowdfunding. I guess I would just say, in order to do what Merle was saying, for the second year, you need to know what you spent the first year. So just
Right.
sure that your first year, you're tracking all those expenses so that you know what you spent. I definitely have done fundraising events, and then I'm like, oh my goodness, I forgot like half the receipts when we still were not audited and stuff. And then I don't know what I actually spent on it. So make sure you're tracking that as much as possible, so that you know what you need to spend the year after.
Excellent. One other question we get a lot is, at what point do you start setting aside like a reserve cash fund, and then like when you start shifting things over to be an investment account versus a cash account, and when do you dip into that? Any thoughts on that?
As soon as you can. When you raise money, it's always good to accomplish everything you've, used the money to accomplish everything that you need to accomplish. But it's wonderful. Some people build into their budget an amount to put in a reserve, especially in the beginning. And you always should aim to have a reserve of at least, I don't know what the standard are, but at least, 8 to 12 months in the bank, so you can, cover cash flow needs. And if something turns way south, you have time to course correct.
Caterina, experience on that side? Anything else?
I agree. We actually established our savings fund is what we call it in year 4, so pretty late.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely agree as soon as possible and build it. Like I said, don't forget to build in your salary. Don't forget to build in like that percentage of the total expenses that you're gonna just of the total income that you're gonna start setting aside for a savings fund. Like in real life, we always need a savings fund.
What about when you really have like an investment account? I mean, at what point do you sort of stick things when it's in a managed, you have a part of your finance committee or investment committee um, managing that? Do you ever get to that point, or when do people get to that point?
Yeah, I think it comes back to cash flow again. And if you have enough money to, you've done your cash flow analysis and add a little bit more, there's no reason why you can't invest the money you won't be needing on a cash flow basis in a higher yield instrument.
Good point.
Mhm.
Anything else? If people from the audience, if you want to raise your hand or you could put something in chat, um, we'd be happy to answer your questions. Yes, I saw. Thank you, Phil, for making a note about fiscal sponsorship. If you don't want to fully incorporate, that is always an
Mhm.
option.
Oh, yeah.
As a startup organization, absolutely. We've been there. I want to let me make sure I can see.
And if I may add, I know it's not a top priority for a budget, but as a board and as the health of your organization and for nonprofits, more often than not, they are run by, and a lot of them, executive leadership are women. And women historically tend to save less for themselves. I used to work for a social services organization, so this is ingrained in me. So think about setting up a 403B for your staff, because where you're a healthy organization is where your team is healthy, they feel safe, they feel secure. You will have less turnaround, you will have less training time. It'll save you a lot of other headaches if you are able to serve your team there. So a 403B is not the hardest thing to set up. Um, it's just like a 401k, but it's set up for nonprofits, and it makes your team feel secure, feel safe, and they have savings for when they retire as well. They don't constantly look towards the corporate world and to see, I could be making so much more. Let me just jump ship, go there for 5 years and come back. So especially for nonprofits, it's really critical to keep that in mind.
That's a beautiful point. Thank you. Anyone else have, you can ask some specific questions or comments if we didn't get to you. I will share. Oh, here we go. Somebody take a look at that. I'm going to go grab our resources sheet that I will share with you all.
Yes, excellent, Keith. TechSoup, if you were a nonprofit organization, please do join TechSoup, because they give you a lot of, they give you, you can buy cheaper laptops. There's a QuickBooks TechSoup version, Zoom, Adobe, everything. So it really does help. Thank you.
Okay, here's our resources guide. We brought in some. Seems like there's never enough time. Any advice on budgeting your time? That's a good point. Caterina, Samra, you've got a million, as an executive director, you have a million things you could be doing. How do you figure out what to spend when you're just putting out fires, or do you secure some time to think about strategic planning or budgeting or whatever?
There are days that require fires putting out. There are days that don't. Time management is one of the biggest things that you do have to think about. And every quarter, I do take stock of things that I've put my time in or things that are coming up. And I do see what I cannot keep up and maintain with integrity. And especially if it's a voluntary position, then I do say that I'm, stepping away from that, or I will say, this is my limit for this quarter, and then I will come back next quarter. So be mindful and be honest and, with your time. But as an ED, there's not going to be that option for you. But then you have to be quick about it. You just have, quick walkthrough meetings, Documentation is going to be important. Email scheduling has been my friend for a very long time. Folders, calendar, reminders. I don't know. Katrina and I have used, I think, everything under the sun we've used. WhatsApp, video calls, just whatever works.
Caterina, from your seat as executive director, managing, any thoughts about budgeting time? That's a great question.
Yeah, I think I'd love to hear from someone else about this, but I always budget time in the morning to go over emails. I think one of the things that is really hard is when you're like, you have a plan for the day and then you're receiving notifications on your email throughout the day, and then you're doing one thing and then another thing and then another thing. So one practice that I have is just check my emails in the morning, then check my emails in the evenings, and try to not reply to emails within the day. Just so that I'm not constantly responding to notifications. I also think for those of you that are more starting out, trying to actually like track your time has been something really helpful for me. Like at the end of the day, how did I spend my 8 hours today? I spent my 2 hours doing this, 4 hours doing this, 6, whatever. And then at the end of the month, looking it over and thinking through like, how could I have spent my time differently? That's been really helpful for me. It's also a helpful management tool if you're managing a new employee that's managing a lot of different things, and asking them, again, it doesn't have to be like super bureaucratic where you're, writing down everything you did, but just generally speaking, I spent 6 hours today dealing with a client and I'm DD and I should not be in that job. Then that's good to know.
Got it. Anything else, Samra, Merle?
Just what Katrina said, I was just typing that this is an excellent tool, because if the ED is tracking their time properly and critically, then you sit with the team and you do roles distribution. And Katrina and I have had so many meetings just on roles distribution, because she's shown me her roles and I'll be like, I wonder if an ED should be doing this. Could this be given to someone else? So it is my role as board chair to sit with her and remove tasks and be able to allow her to delegate them to someone else, because sometimes the board chair can be the bad guy and be like, guys, the board shifted the roles and they went there. So we can also play, good cop, bad cop within ourselves and kind of manage the team instead of be like, oh, Katrina doesn't want to, she doesn't want to do this anymore. So that's where I would like to, just tell everyone that just take a deep breath, know what your role is. You're there to support the ED and the organization in the board. It's an honor to serve, because once you've committed yourself to a mission, you want to make it work and you're there to make sure it works. But it's only as good as the health of the team. And that's what you're viewing from the outside. And that's why all of my conversation has been around how do we make a healthy team so that it can stay on the budget, it can stay, they will know what they're doing, because the ED is knows what they're doing, but it's your job to look at what they're doing and how do you give them that, that time away. That I literally said that, Katrina, you need to go on vacation. I think we sent Nida on her first vacation as well. We're like, no, Nida's going on vacation. So I think those are the things that if we can help, we can bring in these best practices, because startups especially, it's very difficult to go. I will say this, it's very difficult to birth a startup, but it's even harder to go from a startup to a sustained startup, and then to go to, if you want to go from good to the best, you will have to go through those growing pains and live through this. There's a lot of ethical accountability that's required within the institutions to hold themselves accountable, that my ED needs rest, my support staff needs this. We need another person here, because the board is the one that has to promise, like Merle said in the beginning, you need an accountant. You cannot do this anymore. But then the budget is going to shift Now the board has to be there to support that budget growth. So it is a cycle of health and best practices that hold each other together and then grow forward.
Yeah, and if I can add one more thing from the ED perspective on the board, I think sometimes just to remember that the board does have that long-term view and bigger view, right? Like sometimes it can feel well, obviously I would love an accountant, but how am I supposed to do that? Like, oh, they just have ideas, but just remember, like, those ideas are really important because you can't have that perspective. Like, you are in the weeds, so you're never gonna see the larger perspective of, you know, where's the iceberg and how are you gonna, where's the ship going? So just remember, they're seeing it from their end, and that's a valuable perspective, even if it's not your own. And, you know,
Thank you. I think we got time for two quick questions, and then I think we should be able to wrap up. Someone asked any tips for steps about budgeting to include projections for long-term financial health. Anything particular, you know, when you're thinking about, or does your board remind you about things you're going to need for strengthening the balance sheet, how you're going to manage your liabilities? How about, you know, you're going to eventually need to redo the kitchen, something like that. Any tips or thoughts about that?
As board, I would just say constantly keep the strategic plan in your view, 5-year, 10-year, because you've built those with the leadership team, and then that is what will predict the kitchen needs redoing. This is going to come up. This is coming up because you're constantly keeping that strategic long view in mind as well.
And then
There's a question in the
go ahead.
chat.
Yeah, go
So-
ahead. You
I
wanna-
was going to address that.
Yes,
Is that
please.
okay?
Yes.
You really, I just went through this with the executive director, I'm chair of a board, and with the executive director today. The only thing you can control in this environment are your expenses. So somebody wrote in the chat, I don't know if anybody sees, but given this new special times and circumstances, I find it very difficult to predict the income in the coming years. So you have to make assumptions, and the only thing you can control is your expenses. So you have to again turn to scenarios and say, if I don't get this grant, what actions will I be taking? And the time to think about that is now, not when you get the alert that the money is not coming in. And if you're fortunate, you have some savings that you can shore up, so you don't have to make any abrupt changes. But the only control you have is your expenses.
I completely agree. And I think, again, I want to go back to this like scenario A, B, C, just have, you know, even if it's scary to talk about, have a conversation with your board chair or with your finance person about what happens if our biggest grant gets canceled. Look at what expenses you're going to cut. At least you know in your head, this is what I'll do. I think that helps me sleep at night. At least I have a plan. You know, I hope I never have to use it, but if I have to, I know what we're going to prioritize and how. I think, you know, also just maybe this is obvious, but look at individual giving, crowd giving, foundations, government grants are going to be a lot harder to predict. So if you can,
Yeah.
try to diversify your revenue stream as much as possible.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I think this is the time to really look hard at, you know, your prior fundraising approaches, and this is the time to think creatively about average price per gift, and maybe go after something broad that a lower tier, and make it up, as I say, make it up in volume. Because, you know, people, instead, with the market and everything the way it is, maybe they're going to reduce that $1,000 gift they usually give you to 250, right? And so I think this is probably what I'm certainly expecting. So try to get creative about ways that you can raise a small amount of money from a lot of people instead.
Awesome points. We are at the end of our hour. I think, thank you so much to Merle, Caterina, and Samra. You've really given us a full perspective on this. I hope our audience learned something. You can always ask some questions. Send us an email later. You know how to reach us up from the website. If you didn't get a chance to open up that document I sent, which has some resources, including places for training, templates, a bunch of other things that'll help you with your budget. And, you know, there are some very good learnings that you can continue to do, whether you're on the board side or the on the operations side.
And also, there were so many good questions that came that could be followed up on, like, how do you plan for a downturn? There's a lot of offshoot questions that came, and we could definitely design programming around that. So if there is things on this presentation that resonated with you that you would like to take a deeper dive into, just let us know and we can organize Zooms around that.
Amazing, amazing. And don't forget, all executive directors, if you're interested, let me know. We have a monthly nonprofit leaders consortium where you get together and you can share and bounce ideas off of each other. It's a safe space if you want to, you know, wrestle with an issue that you're having with your board chair or vice versa. You're there, and some of these questions folks are asking, guaranteed someone else on our network has done that. So feel free to email me and we'll get you on that list if you'd like to join us. I think we're the third Thursday at lunchtime of every month. Other than that, thank you everyone for sharing your time with us, and have a great evening. We will record, this has been recorded, so we will share it and the resources, and just let anybody at YANA know if you guys ever need anything. Wealth of resources like Merle, Summer, and Caterina. And thank you again to our panelists. Thank you so much for
Good
sharing.
night, everybody. Thanks for
Great
coming.
night.
Night. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.